Sundari Mahalingam, Lecturers of UUM School of Law, President of ALSA UUM, Mr. Muhammad Zulkarnain Wan Azmira, Mr. Eun Se Wei, our Program Director, ALSA UUM Board members, ALSA UUM members, and fellow participants. Welcome to ALSA UUM Legal Forum 2021. We would like to thank everyone for taking your time to be with us this afternoon to attend this eminent event. We sincerely hope that everyone will be able to gain valuable insights from this forum. My name is Fatim Farina, and I will be your moderator for today. Before we begin this event, I would like to kindly request everyone to always keep your cameras on to assure that this is an engaging session for all. Additionally, kindly ensure that your mic is muted throughout the session to avoid any disturbance. For a kind reminder to the participants, you may kindly refer to the manual guideline as provided in the participant WhatsApp group. Thank you. To begin our ceremony, we will now honor the National Anthem of Malaysia, Negaraku, UUM University Anthem, Biru Warna, and ALSA Anthem.
Mencari ilmu, berteman kebudimanan, bina nusa, bina dunia sejahtera. Uni utama ibu yang tercinta, kami doa lanjut usia bahagia. Kami janji hormati bersama ilmu budi dan bakti. Alam bisa Tuhan membara langit biru mencari ilmu, berteman kebudimanan, bina nusa, bina dunia sejahtera. Utama ibu yang tercinta, kami doa lanjut usia bahagia. Kami janji hormati pesanmu, ilmu budi dan bakti, ilmu budi dan bakti.
Next, let us welcome Mr. Muhammad Amin bin Ahmad Kamal to lead the prayer recitation.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين Rahim. On this blessed day, we express our gratitude to you for allowing us to attend the ceremony of ALSA UUM Legal Forum 2021, House Rental Racism, Preferences, or Discrimination. We seek your blessing for a flawless progress of this event from the beginning till the end. We seek your guidance to stay clear of the event that will determine the progress of this event. Ya Latif, Ya Rahman, please bless us with your taufiq and hidayat. Please guide University Utara Malaysia and ALSA UUM to greatness, peace, glory, and prosperity in this world and the hereafter. Make us a responsible intellectual. Grant us with available knowledge that will be beneficial to mankind in order to gain your madatillah. Make us your righteous servant that follow your command and neglect the sinful act. Please forgive us and for our wrongdoing. Ya Munzilal Barakat. Disturb peace to our beloved country, Malaysia. Preserve us from any threat and disaster, neither man-made nor natural disaster. And to you, Ya Allah, we ask for security and prosperity upon us, our leader, and our country. Bestow patience in us in order to face the challenges from you. Please accept our deed and please reward us accordingly. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanah wa qina azabannar. Sallallahu ala sayidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.
Thank you, Mr. Amin. Now, let us all watch a speech video from Associate Professor Dr. Rohana Abdul Rahman, Dean of School of Law, University Utara Malaysia, to deliver her welcoming remarks. Let us watch the speech video.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good day to all present. Firstly, thank you, Mr. Chairperson, and to the organizer, the ALSA UUM chapter, especially to Mr. Zulkarnain Wan Asmira, the President of ALSA UUM, and Mr. Ng Choong Kiat, the President of Law Student Society. Thank you for inviting me to deliver this welcoming speech. Secondly, I would like to welcome the panelists who have graciously accepted our invitation to speak at this forum. Ms. Morgana Sundari, a practicing lawyer, Mr. Nazim Ganti Sha'ari, a law lecturer, and Ms. Melanie Ong, a representative from Speed Home. Welcome to UUM, and I'm sure your presence and your sharing on today's topic will be beneficial and enlightening to all participants in today's forum. The topic, house rental racism, preference or discrimination. I believe this is a timely issue to be discussed today. I was informed by the organizer that there are three objectives of the forum. One is to explore the history of house rental racism in Malaysia. Secondly, is to examine the current issue of house rental racism in Malaysia. And third is to discuss the potential of residential tenancy law in Malaysia. I hope the panelists would be able to contribute towards achieving these objectives. And I also hope that all participants will ask questions and share your opinions on this important topic. I do not intend to speak long, so I wish all the best to the panelists and to all the participants. May you all have a fruitful discussion today. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, house rental racism is not a new issue that arises in our country. Studies reveal reveals that about 1 in 5 Malaysians have faced discrimination based on their ethnicity when renting properties. Among the Malaysians, the Indian society is the most affected ethnicity. Statistics portray that 45% of 10,000 rental listings in Klang Valley will reject Malaysian Indian tenants. On average, the monthly rental paid by Indians is 19% more than non-Indians. This raises enormous grievances among them. Article 8 of the Federal Constitution enunciates that there shall be no discrimination against citizens on the grounds of religion, race, descent, place of birth, or gender. Rental discrimination is contradicting with this article and deprives the right of equality of the citizens. As part of the nation, everyone, regardless of race, should bear the responsibility to curb house rental racism, especially to change the mindsets of the landlords from judging potential tenants based solely on race and religion. In response to this issue, a law known as Residential Tenancy Act was proposed and will be tabled in Parliament. Residential Tenancy Act aims to resolve issues on racial discrimination in the property market and suppress the effect arising from racial stereotypes to our citizens. Moving on, we are honored to introduce our distinguished speakers. First, we have Mr. Muhammad Nazim bin Ganti Sha'ari, who is a lecturer from Faculty of Law, UITM. Mr. Nazim is an expert in constitutional history of Malaysia, legal history, legal philosophy, humanities, historical and civilization studies. He is also an author for 2 articles titled Whether the Bumi Putra Identity in UITM and Unconstitutional Constitutional Amendments, which were published in Journal Kajian Malaysia. His other article titled Malaysia's Constitutional Identity was also published in Illusion of Democracy. Good afternoon, Mr. Nazim. Thank you for being with us today. How are you doing today?
Still okay, still alive.
It's good to hear that. Thank you so much. Next, we would like to introduce our second esteemed speaker, Ms. Melanie Ong. She is the Head of Human Resources, Customer Experience and Home Runners of Speed Home. In 2015, Ms. Melanie successfully obtained an Associate of Chartered Certified Accountants ACCA qualification from Sunway University. She then officially began her career as an Audit Associate of PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, from 2012 to 2013. She also had experience working as a hospital representative of Merck Sediam Berhad and had held the position of the Demand Manager of Catch the Bus before she became part of the Speed Homes team in 2018. Miss Melanie, we are grateful to have you here with us today. Have you eaten?
Not yet.
Oh, we really hope that you will have your meal afterwards, after this session ends. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Followed by our third guest speaker today, Ms. Morgana Sundari Mahalingam, who is a legal associate from Mazhar Azmi Fazli Maha and Sim. Her area of practicing is mainly on construction dispute and industrial relations. Ms. Morgana has been an active member of Miss Malaysia Indian Care MMI Care Association since 2014, which aims to empower young women via personal empowerment, environmental awareness, and women reproductive health components. She was also a law program coordinator and lecturer of Stanfield College, Singapore for 10 months in 2016. On top of that, Ms. Morgana was a project coordinator of North-South Initiative, NSI, and project manager of Our Journey in 2018 and 2019. Good afternoon, Ms. Morgana. It is a privilege to have you here with us. How are you feeling today?
Thank you for having me. A bit nervous, but excited.
Totally understand. We really appreciate your presence today. Mr. Nazim, Ms. Melanie, and Ms. Morgana, welcome. We would like to express our sincere gratitude for your kind presence here today to share your knowledge regarding house rental racism. Before we begin the presentation session, I would like to kindly request everyone to always keep your cameras on to ensure that this is an engaging session for all. Additionally, feel free to utilize the chat box if you have any inquiries during the sharing session. Thank you. We will now begin our first presentation session, History and Origin of Racism in Malaysia. In the 19th century, a society with divergent cultural population was shaped in Malaya due to British power that arrived in Malaya, which implemented the unrestricted immigration policy. According to the social demography in 1957, the Malay population was 49.8%, while the Chinese and Indian dominated 37.2% and 11.3% respectively. It showed that the Malay population was only slightly larger than the combined total of Chinese, Indian, and others. Meanwhile, in the post-independence, the Malaysian government has been striving hard to enhance the relationship among different races by implementing various policies. However, several forms of discrimination and racism are somewhat inevitable. Therefore, it could not be denied that the housing rental racism may be linked to the historical background of Malaysia itself. Was it that the colonial system created an unstable demographic balance, or was it because of the divide and rule policy practiced by the British? And how should we view racism from the side of jurisprudence? With that being said, ALSA UUM Legal Forum 2021 welcome you, Mr. Nazim bin Ganti Syari, who is the lecturer at University Technology Mara, to analyze housing rental racism from the perspective of history and jurisprudence. Mr. Nazim, the floor is yours.
Okay. Share. And nothing's happening. Nothing's happening. Okay. Could you hear me? Is everything okay?
Yes, we can hear you, Mr. Nazim.
Okay.
Loud and
Right.
clear.
Are my slides okay? Could you see my slides?
Yes, we could see your slide.
Okay. Hang on. Oh no, it's oh no, and slideshow. How do I do this?
Mr. Nazim, perhaps you can
Yes.
make it to become full screen.
I'm trying. Give me some time. Sorry.
Okay, you may right click and see. Right click on the screen,
Okay, done.
and it will appear the options of high presenter view.
Where is that? Hang on. Okay, you're sharing Microsoft Point. Is this okay?
I'm still in the presenter view. Perhaps you can click the three dot button there at the bottom. There are three dot button icon. Yeah.
This one.
Yeah, next to it.
Next to it.
Yeah, the three dot button.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Click the hide presenter view. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Now, is everything okay? Can we start?
Yeah. Perfect. You
Thank
can
you, thank you.
Mr. Nazim.
Assalamualaikum. Sorry. Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone. Thank you also for inviting me. My kind regards to the Dean and also to Associate Professor Mungat Khairuddin, an old friend of mine. Hello everyone in UM and hello everyone who is watching this. First things first, I'm not an expert in constitutional law because I would readily give way to maybe a lawyer, Lim Jim Wade, and a PhD student, Shukri Shahizam, who is doing his PhD in London, and those are far more credible than me. So I'm just a scholar, I'm just a law student like any one of you. So any stuff that I know, I would share them. Any stuff that is incorrect by me, that'll be my error, and please point out my errors. Okay, feel free to do that at any point of time. Right, okay, now, having said that, let's look into racism. I'm going to look into firstly, we're going to share with you some slides and you're just going to ponder over them and you have to think about them, whether these are examples of racism or whether these are just normal occurrences of everyday life. Now, let's start. Is this racism? Clearly, because this is about British race. Sorry, this is an advertisement for a fashion line in British India. Very expensive, mind you. More expensive than East India Company garments. But yeah, not many people have any problem in accepting the fact that British colonialism was a form of racism. One of the worst forms of racism, in fact. So not a problem with that. Is this racism? This is what happened in the American South before the civil rights movement. So clearly you have separate facilities for colors, separate facilities for the whites. So not a problem. Yes, it is racism. Next, this is one of the scenes, daily scenes in apartheid era in South Africa. Remember, South Africa only got freed itself from apartheid in 1994. The first democratic elections was held in 1994. The first democratic government happened in 1995. So back then, it was normal for this. There were some areas only for the whites, and there were some areas only for the blacks. Okay, and they could not interfere with each other. So clearly, no problem. Yes, this is racism. Okay, now we go to some interesting slides. Is this racism? And this was an advertisement for jobs and body shop, sales consultant, senior sales consultant, only Chinese. And this was reported in the email, and a lot of people found that this is not fair, this is discriminatory, this is racist. Okay, but bear in mind, after this incident, the body shop published an apology. Next, this is very relevant to what we're having today. Is this racism? This is an advertisement for room for rent, which is only for Malaysia Chinese student only. So many people have problems with this because they say this is a form of discrimination which is based on racism. It should not be like that, and you should not only offer your rooms or houses for rent only for a certain groups of ethnicities only. It should be open for everyone. Okay. Is this racism? The context of this infographic, remember this happened in 2019 in a convocation ceremony in Malaya. There was one Chinese student who held a demonstration on stage. He demanded that the Vice Chancellor of UM step down because he wasn't happy with the involvement of the Vice Chancellor of UM in the Congress Maruah Melayu event in Shah Alam. Okay, so immediately after that, so you had this coming from Kursi Institut Raja Melayu, saying this, saying, you know, you have to beradab and so on, and tidak bertamadun itu oleh pendatang singkir. So is it racism? Some people say, no, it is not racism because it was trying to point out how you have to live your life of virtue, you have to be beradab and everything, but some people believe that this is racism. I think after this incident, Prof. Zainal Keling was called in for questioning by the police, but I don't know what happened after that. But now, obviously, we have a new penyandang kursi, who is Professor Shamil, who was taken in from UIA. Next, is this racism? In 2008, the Menteri Besar Selangor, Dr. Khalid, gave the speech that he asked for UiTM to be open for the non-member class 10%. So immediately after that, you have all of these massive protests, public demonstrations by students of UiTM, not just in Shah Alam. I think if I could remember, the students in UiTM Shah Alam left classes on that whole day and went to have a public demonstration on the streets of Shah Alam, leading up towards bangunan Setiausaha Kerajaan Negeri. This happened in Matu Melaka. We're going to address this later on because UiTM is a creature under Article 153 by virtue of the UiTM Act, and then we're going to see whether affirmative action policies under Article 153 is considered racism. And that will be very interesting. And I'm sure the stuff that we're going to cover today have not been covered in any of your ceramah Perpaduan Melayu or any of your other ceramah in back in universities. I'm confident with that. Next, is this racism? Clearly, you wouldn't have any problems with this because if you look into this advertisement, female models wanted only for Caucasians, Eurasians, Chinese, North Indians. What is a common denominator among all of this? These are people of fair complexion, fair skin, kulit putih. So many people have voiced out their concern that this is race and all that. But if I'm not mistaken, there was a response to this company because this was just targeting demographics. It was just targeting their buyers, and their buyers would like to see this image. Okay, yeah. Is this racism? Because, a lot of nations say, no, we are not racist. We're against this racism. We're very, very good people. But then once in a while, we come across something like this. Tuan rumah diminta tidak menyewa rumah kepada Negro, to Africans. Africans are blacks. They're not. I'm trying to make it, it's not a good thing, not a good time to make a joke. At Negroes, Africans, racism against them. So is this racism? And some people believe that this is racism because you're assuming that because they're Africans, therefore they're prone to crimes. That's racism. Is this racism? Well, yeah, you answer it. Some people will say, no, this is not racism, this is colorism. Colorism is where you prefer to have a white skin. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but that's just a matter of preference. Well, too bad for you. Many people would feel that this is racism. And this issue happened in India. I'm sure this is also an issue in Malaysia where a lot of people buy skin whitening creams. Right. Okay, so all of these are relevant in today's world, and all of this will shape your view on what do you mean by racism. Sorry, my clock is not working right now. Okay, what is racism, and is this racism, and what are we going to do about it? Next, when you look into racism, firstly, you cannot run away from the doctrine of scientific racism, which is strange because there are some people in the world who try to justify racism scientifically. And obviously, this is pseudoscience. It is not really scientific, but people would like to call it scientific. It's not. But there you go. A long time ago, there was this research that tried to project this image that racism is valid, that it is okay for you to look down on other people, on other races. It is okay for you to assume that those are far inferior than you. That your race is superior than their race. When you look into the arrangement of this picture, there was this clearly. People will say that a Caucasian is the model race, their civilization is the best civilization ever. Well, that's racism. But bear in mind, some people try to scientifically justify this. The theory doesn't stand, okay? But the theory of scientific racism exists even until today. Next, scientific racism also happens in which some scientists or researchers try to examine your physiology, your anatomy, your profile, your personal profile to Greek statues. And they find that, look, profile of Europeans fit into the picture, more veering towards the Greek statues. Therefore, Europeans and Caucasians, they are far better, far superior than anyone else when you first look at their own profile. And they compare the profile to the blacks, to orangutans, and to some Asians, and to some convicts in their own prisons. Again, all of this try to justify that it is okay to be racist. Obviously, it is not, but I have to bear in mind that the theories based on scientific racism exist even until today, are still continuing to be used even until today. Okay. Next, what is it that we do not like about racism? Because from racism, you will arrive at all of this. Number one, hate speech. Obviously, hate speech is based on racism. Example, Melayu Malas, another example. Cina Babi, another example. India Kumabo. So these are examples of hate speech that you're trying to denigrate, you're trying to put down other people based on their own race. Because obviously, not all Malays are Malas, and so on and so forth. You cannot justify, generalize all the members of that ethnicity to be like that. That's racism. Next, hate crimes. Nothing new, because we've seen hate crimes happening in the US against Arabs, against Muslims, against blacks for that matter. Lately, we see hate crimes happening to Asians. Asians are assaulted left and right in Western countries because of COVID-19. Obviously, this is kind of extraordinary. It does not make sense, because how could you say just because they're Asians, therefore they're responsible for COVID-19? But there you go. No, there's nothing intellectual about racism anyway. Next, racism is also a cause for discrimination, where you're discriminated and for example, this in the housing market and in rental property, in jobs. You do not get all of this simply because of your race. Next, slavery. Slavery is one of the worst forms of racism, because you are treating that person as a non-human because of his race. Colonialism. There are many people who are okay with colonialism because they say colonialism is good. No, colonialism is not good. It is a form of racism. And we'll go on to that later on. Genocide, for example, the genocide of the Jews in the Second World War and the genocide of the Armenians in Turkey. Those are among the worst forms of racism. So these are the reasons why, among the reasons why we do not like racism. At any point of time, we must take a firm stand against racism. Okay. Next. Now, racism is not just only a way of thinking, it was also packaged and to be spread around the world by these two things, Orientalism and colonialism. Now, what is Orientalism? And you have all of these writers coming in to visit our country, known as British Malaya during those days. And these people like Sir Frank Swettenham and guys, Isabella Budd and so on, the rich British planters, British government officials who would write a lot of things, our way of life, our ways of Malay life in the kampung, how Chinese make their own businesses, how the Tamil Indians live in the estates. And you would find that, this is very interesting. They're so concerned about us. They're trying to put us out there and on the world market. Well, no, they did not come here with that intention. The purpose of Orientalism is to present us to their own audience back in their home country in a bad light. So, the end purpose is, oh my God, these people are so weird, they are so exotic, they are so wild, they are so barbaric, uncivilized, but they are interesting. Yes, of course, that's Orientalism. And yeah, with Orientalism, we also have to be careful, because how do you deal with Orientalism? One of the ways is that you're trying to deal with them in Orientalism in reverse. This is where you say, you cannot attack us, we are so special. We've done certain pretty bad things in the past, you cannot attack us, you cannot condemn us. If we have time later on, I'll go on into this. Colonialism, of course, you're going into someone else's country, you assume that you're much better than them, and you assume favoritism should be given to you at all times because of your skin, because of ethnicity. Colonialism is not interested in the plight and welfare of the natives. No, they're not. They are always interested for the profits of the colonial power. That's why colonialism is a form of racism. Next, okay, in law school, we learn about racism because racism is based on race. Hello, yes. Okay, so can you use that as a basis of law? Now, you feel that law comes from the state, anything that comes from the state is law, and then, of course, there's another view that law looks into the content, it must be good, just, fair, and so on. And the historical school of law comes from customs of the people. So civic need, law is a creation of the national consciousness. What is this? Law is derived from the spirit of the people, the community, the tribe, the ethnic group. Okay, so that, That is used later on to have in making racist laws in Nazi Germany. Anthropological School of Law and Sir Henry Bain will look at jurisprudence. This is where the use of racism to proclaim that the most advanced legal system in the world is the European legal system, and other legal systems should inspire towards to be the same like the European legal system. That's racism, because you assume that you're much better than anyone else, and you're also assuming that your legal system therefore is the best. That's racism. So be very careful when you read Historical Anthropological School of Law. Next, Nazi Germany, one of the worst effects of a legal system based on racism, and not just Southern American states before the Civil War, but also here in Nazi Germany, that law is based on race. The true German nation is committed by bonds of blood, not by communism experience. German soul has to be considered. So what if you're not German? What if you're not Aryan? You would lose out. Like what happened to the Jews? Firstly, their property were confiscated away from them. They were assaulted in the streets, and then the German nationality was stripped away from them, herded in groups in ghettos, and finally sent off to concentration camps. So that was because of racism, where Aryan nation was considered far superior than any of the races. So again, we have to be very careful whenever we see instances of racism around us. Okay, next. Obviously, you cannot run away from talking about Zionism in Israel, because clearly this is one of the worst forms of racism ever, and this was found conclusively in one of the United Nations agenda before the attack on World Trade Center in New York. Why this is bad? Because as long as you are a Jew, doesn't matter where you come from, whether you're a Russian Jew or American Jew, you could come to settle down in Israel under the policy of Aliyah. What happened if you're an Arab who have been staying long in Jerusalem way before even the creation of the state of Israel in the 1960s? The answer is simple. You don't get any rights. You don't enjoy any rights. You're second-class citizens. That's racism, clearly. So again, when we talk about Article 153, we have to be very careful, because we do not want to see the affirmative action under Article 153 to be classified on a similar standard with the racist special rights only for the Jews. That's not the intention of having Article 153. Okay, these are the depictions of the British. Malay is an idler, Pemalas, Chinese thief, Pencuri, Indian is a drunkard. There you go. One of the depictions. Very, very popular during British colonialism. Next, here Isabella Brad found that Malays are very much similar like the Indians in the US. They amount to nothing. They could do nothing. They contribute to nothing. Racism. These are the popular images thrown in by British colonialists. Next, racism for the Tamils. One of the British planters, Ainsworth, said this: "Was specimen, both intrinsic morale, abject cowardly, generally lacking vitality, half-starved and so on, blind admiration for white men is really rather pathetic." Then how dare you? You brought in all of these poor people from Tamil to work in your essays. You didn't even care for their welfare. How dare you calling them rather pathetic? This is a form of racism. And this is among the things that the Indians in Malaysia have been enduring even until today. Next, in the book of Real Malay, again, we see stereotypes by the British. Malay hates labor, Pemalas, and all that. Very bad in business, has aspirations, he loves power and plays. Again, racism. Malays are Pemalas and can't do business. What about the Chinese? Chinese are beasts who suck the honey from every profitable undertaking, meaning greedy, cannot be trusted. Anything else, they only realize two positions: giving and receiving orders. But they're robots. This was, again, the image thrown to us. Next, the Hindu, Tamil, poor thing, oiling body, cringing demeanor, maddening speech. But for all that, he's very useful, whether as a laborer, cattle keeper, and all that. So what do we see here? The images of all of these ethnic groups have been put in place by colonialism, which is based on racism. And these images continue even until today. So what do we do about all this? Because there's no point trying to say that, oh, no, they are not racist. This is not good. No, you know as well as I do that these things exist. Next, are Malays racist in nature? This is a very difficult question, but when you examine Malay classical literature, for example, Hikayat Dandan Setia, you see that Tengku Intan Terpilih was vilified because she was ugly. She had a very dark skin. And when you compare to all the other princesses in other Malay Hikayat, oh, they're so pretty. Look at their skin. So you see, again, Malays cannot run away from the influence of racism. I'm not saying that all Malays are racist. I'm just saying, look at the literature, look at how it has influenced your views. And especially look at the Malay girls who've been buying all these skin whitening products across the counter. And most of them, these are Timbang Kati, by the way. Okay. So what do you do with racism? Is racism discrimination a private matter? We have a case, Beatrix Fernandez, and you know that this is far from satisfactory because in this case, the court said, well, you can't complain. I'm sure all you know what happened with Beatrix Fernandez. This is about the discrimination issue in Malaysian Airlines, that the stewardess was not allowed to get pregnant. The court said this is a private matter. Your Article 8 does not cover a collective agreement entered into between employer and trade union. So again, your rental agreements and all the rental arrangements and all that, this might be discriminatory, but could you complain that these are against Article 8? Okay, so bear in mind, problems concerning discriminations faced by women, these are mostly in private matters such as at home and employment. And that is why you have this international treaty on CEDAW, Elimination of Forms of Discrimination Against Women, to see that, all states should make it their business to protect women, to see that they are not discriminated both publicly and in private matters. So that was the intention of having this international treaty, because you cannot leave it alone to the state. Because when you leave it alone to the state will say, this is a private matter. Constitution law is about public matter. And that thinking has been responsible in all of these discriminations faced by women. So is there any international treaty which covers racial discrimination? Hello, of course there is. This is ICERD. Let me ask the other one. So what happened to ICERD? Should Malaysia ratify ICERD? There you go. This is what happened in 2018. So should Malaysia ratify ICERD and so on? So you have a lot of these people coming out with public demonstration. No, we should not ratify ICERD. This is against Malay rights and so on. Again, there are no such thing as Malay rights. You special position of the Malays, and that is a quota system. I'm not sure why it was not fully translated to all these people, and among many of the professors in Malaysia also who failed to understand the meaning of the word quota. Would ICERD protect Article 153? Yes, it does. Under Article 1, Clause 4, it protects affirmative action policies. So what's the problem? Now, let's look into the history of Article 153, because this has been complained of racism. Before 1957, where did you find Article 153? You only found it in 1948. Before 1948, what did you have? Nothing. What you have only in this book written by Sir Frank Swettenham, saying that Malays should be protected because he is the heir to the inheritance. So, oh my God, Malays are so very, very special. We should protect them, Polaris, so to speak. How is that translated in British policy? Next, the Red Commission report said this. Well, special position of the Malays has always been protected in origin treaties of the Sultans. When you examine all the British treaties signed between the Malay Sultans and the British in this book, none of them said anything about special position of the Malays. None of them at all. So where did Red Commission find this? That it has always been protected in the past. Weird. Next, education policy. British really looked down on the Malays and to ensure that the education policy for the Malays was so bad because it was only designed to produce better fishermen and better farmers. And so, again, where is it saying that Malays have always been protected by the British? Position of the Malays has always been recognized by the British. None whatsoever. Again, let me tell you, there was a duality, one school system for Malay peasantry, Malay masses, the other one for the Malay aristocrats, MCKK, only for the aristocrats, and the British instituted a special scheme only for the Malays, Malay and administrative service, to do all those clerical work, and that is only reserved for students from MCKK. So again, if you say the British have been protecting the Malays, what type of Malays? All of them? No. Next, Article 153 is not about special privileges, quota. If you don't understand the word quota, in the name of Allah, can you please grab hold of a dictionary? Quota is special treatment which is given to members of minorities. Ethnic groups. For example, there are 100 places for in university, not 100 places should be given to all of them. If you reserve all of these 100 places for that minority group, that's not called quota. Quota is to reserve maybe half of that 100 places for that minority group. And you ensure that the rich people from that minority group are not entitled to receive benefits under quota. And that's quota. And that comes together under reservations in reasonable proportions. Next, also the same thing, this was presented in Parliament in 1971 when the government amended the Constitution to insert Clause 8 capital A. The issue was, should we give scholarships to all Malay students in universities, bearing in mind that not many Malay students entered universities those days? And Tun Razak said, no, scholarships will only be given to Malay students who came from poor families. There you go. So not all Malays are entitled to privileges or special treatment under Article 153. So Article 153 is not about racism. It's got to bring in, to help poor, marginalized minorities like the Malays and the natives in Sabah Sarawak. Okay, 4 minutes more. Okay. Next, again, when you look into racism among the so-called racism among ethnic groups, we look into the research done by Professor Anwazis. He said no such thing at all, because any one of these people who talk about the plight of the Malays, how it is important to produce more Malay capitalists, they did not understand the true nature of poverty among the Malays. Next, also in this, you could get this a copy of this from the Hansard. I've left the reference there. And next, here, is there any danger of Chinese against the Malays? And all that? According to this guy, the late Royal Professor, Chinese shopkeepers exploit Chinese fishermen and farmers, and Indian moneylenders would also exploit their own fellow countrymen. So there's no such thing when you look into this whole massive picture of discrimination and racism against each other. No such thing. Okay, but that was done by Royal Professor Anwazis, and until today we haven't heard anyone from the academia seriously discussing about this, even in the context of Article 153. And I've said in many of the ceramah in Article 153 given by so-called experts, both within and outside our universities, none of them have talked about this. Now, it is very dangerous for you to assume racism happening around you to be that if you're Malay, that it is. You cannot assume that all of the Chinese are racist against you, because there's this book written by Benedict Anderson, the late Benedict Anderson. You are imagining that everyone in ethnic group share the same aspirations. No, that's not true, because in any group there will be a certain class issue. So, you know, a certain class issue, the rich will behave in a certain way. And the rich will not share the same aspirations with the lower classes of that particular ethnicity. So you cannot assume that all Chinese are against you. And you cannot assume that all Malays are against you. No, no such thing. It's always about a question of class. So, what do we do with this, with racism? Some people say, oh, we must bersatu padu. This is Sish mentality. Everyone is against us. Jangan Melayu, lawan Melayu, lawan Melayu, Cina tepuk tangan. All this is always nonsense. But, you know, this is how some people deal with racism. And this is because of Sish mentality, where they wrongly assume that everyone is against them. That is how some people try to deal with racism. And they don't see it is a class thing, which is weird. Next, okay, so you try to have conversations and dialogues with those people. Could you reach out to bigots? Because there are some of these people who are not interested in whatever you're saying. Their minds are already fixed. They don't like you. What do you do about them? And first, some people will say a nonsensical thing, not because they're interested in the truth, but they just want to say it anyway. What do you do? Question. The simulation integration, which model? The Indonesian model? Aha. Hello, remember what happened to Indonesian Chinese? Singaporean model. Okay, let's go over Singaporean model. So, the last one, under cultural deficit theory, some people have called out the Malays to be less Malay and more Chinese. And there are some Malays who seriously feel that that is right, and therefore they have this. They feel that the Malay culture is so bad, and they're trying to be more Chinese, less Malay. This is what you call cultural deficit thesis. You're being racist towards your own race. And this is addressed by Dr. Lili Zubaira Karim when she examined the problems that Malays face in Singapore. Finally, okay, so we have some time. Be very careful when you try to accuse someone of racism and so on, because according to Prof. Syed Hussein Alatas, historically speaking, tyranny, oppression, all this were never the work of whole communities against each other. It has always been the dominant minority of a particular community. So you cannot say all of these people are racist and so on. But yes, there are some people who are racist, but you cannot then therefore generalize that the entire group, everyone from that group are racist. All right, well, thank you very much. Feel free to shoot me any questions. Thank you.
It's indeed an insightful sharing in regards to the analysis of housing rent racism from the history and jurisprudence perspective. Thank you, Mr. Nazim. That's the end of our first presentation session. We will move on to the Q&A session. I have collected a few questions from the chat box. One question is from Miss Ain Shafika. She asks, what could be improved in terms of our constitutional framework to curb the racial discrimination in the private sector? Mr. Nazim, will you be able to enlighten us? Thank you.
What could be improved in terms of a constitutional framework to curb the racial discrimination in private sector? Again, like that, which has been addressed in the case of Beatrix Fernandez. Some people will say this is just a matter of preference, and this is a private matter, and this is something which constitutional law should not interfere with. And remember, under Article 1, under our jurisprudence regarding right to equality, there is no such thing as absolute equality in Malaysia. In a few cases, for example, remember Sivara Sarasaya's case, where the court said that if there is a reason for that kind of discrimination and there is a relationship between that reason and the actual discrimination, then although it is discriminatory, it is still valid. Okay, so what could be improved? Make it clearer that any forms of discrimination publicly and privately, these are not allowed, should not be allowed. That's number one. But just because you put laws in place does not mean that it would be immediately understood by the people. So next, what do you do about it? Do academics, all of this, has there been enough education be made in our societies? Because if the problem is, there are many people who don't understand legal issues, and number two, the people who are supposed to educate other people do not want to do their job because of some personal interests which intersects with some political propaganda. So everything. Don't just look at the Constitution. Look at what happens outside the Constitution. Look into reality. Would reality follow from that legal amendment? Okay, hopefully that is enough.
Thank you, Mr. Nazim. There's one more question from Ms. Siti Shazana. She asks, if it's true that Article 153 of the Federal Constitution was meant to be reviewed every few years to see if it's necessary to be retained, or is it just simply a rumor?
No, when you look into one of these books written by Professor Fernando of UNISMA, professor regarding the history of the Constitution, in leading up to the creation of 1957 Constitution, the proposal was given by UMNO. UMNO was one that proposes that, we propose that we keep this Article 153 and then it should be reviewed after some time. And that proposal came from UMNO, by the way. But later on, when it was further discussed in the London constitutional proposals leading up to the white paper constitutional proposals, that suggestion was conveniently left out. So we don't know why. But again, when we talked about Article 153, whether it should be reviewed or not, having affirmative action like Article 153 is not something which is which is strange, which is weird, because other countries also have their own affirmative action policies. But affirmative action policy that exists on paper and affirmative action policy which are actually carried out, these are two different things. And we must, at all times, and as a Malayan, I'm telling you this, I do not want to see our Article 153 ending up being the same like special rights only for the Jews in Israel. That wasn't the intention of Article 153. Thank you.
Thank you. There is one last question from Ting Liu Hua. He inquires that it seems that the racial issues are among the historical problems in Malaysia. So from your perspective, what is the most efficient method to resolve this historical problem?
Oh my goodness. Maybe we should banish them to the US for some time so that they could live freely with each other and then go through discrimination that Asians face in the US and come back to Malaysia and feel that here is better and don't discriminate against Asia. No, forget that. What is the most efficient method? Obviously, I don't know. The law is there, education is there, but then not much education has also been there. Because I have a problem with many pencerama, and some of these are professors, Professor Madhya, who keep on being invited to talk about Article 153, but they don't really address the actual history of Article 153 and why it is there and what are the abuses under this. These have never been addressed by any of these favorite and well-known and famous pencerama in Malaysia. So maybe we should tackle that first. Stop platforming all of these well-known personalities in giving all this ceramah, and as law students, you do your job, you give the ceramah. Then we'll see what happens.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nazim, for enlightening us with the question.
Thank you.
Next, our second presentation session. The House rental racism has been deemed as an uncovering definite racial discrimination in Malaysia. Commonly, many landlords will instruct the agents to reject people of certain races or nationalities as based on their experience, these groups of people tend to be bad tenants. Furthermore, the present law in Malaysia did not protect the citizen from house rental racism. However, the Parliament is finally aware of the severeness of house rental racism in Malaysia and is starting to draft a set of laws to control it, namely the Residential Tenancy Act. All in all, the question arises, what are the actual data and statistics of house rental racism in Malaysia? What are the impacts of house rental racism in Malaysia? And how does the Residential Tenancy Act help in such a situation? Without further ado, ALSA UUM Legal Forum 2021 would proudly invite Ms. Melanie Ong, the Head of Human Resources, Customer Experience and Home Runners from Speed Home, to enlighten us on the issues of house rental racism and her comment towards Residential Tenancy Act. Also, share with us what inspired the establishment of Speed Home. Overview of house rental racism in Malaysia. Ms. Melanie, you may have the floor.
Thank you, Ms. Fatin. Let me try to share my screen first, yeah. Okay, sorry, hang on. Second. Okay, if you can't hear me or can't see my screen, someone please unmute and let me know, right? So, because I'm not very familiar with this WebEx or VBEX or whatever you call it. Okay, thank you for having me today. I think it was very insightful what Mr. Nazim shared earlier. What I would go on about on my session is more towards the racism in renting and also what we experience in Speed Home, right? Let me share a little bit about myself. I'm Melanie Ong. I'm the head of customer experience, sales and support, human resources, and also home runners. And I've joined Speed Home, back then Speed Rent, for 3 years now. So I've seen my fair share of all types of racism coming from the owners. And then it will go about after that fight, sort of arguing with the tenants, and they will throw hate speech to each other and all that kind of thing. I've seen it before myself also. All right. Okay, so earlier you all did mention in regards to what inspired Speed Home to be here today, right? There are a couple of reasons. One of them, actually, to be honest, it's in regards to racism. Our CEO and founder Wong Wei Ming, he personally also have experienced racism firsthand, even when he was in the UK, being an Asian, stuff like that. Also, he actually went through that many years ago. And also, when he came back to Malaysia and he was trying to rent out his unit, he noticed that there was a lot of other friends of his, landlords' wives, were also saying the same thing. Tenants also were speaking of racism. Now, we then come to why after that Speed Home now, and what we do really stand for is no discrimination. We actually have core values, equality. In that sense, I will share a little bit later. A secure renting experience and also affordable renting. As you all know, as you all should know, Speed Home is actually a zero deposit platform for tenant. So tenant does not have to pay that hefty amount in terms of a deposit, right? Okay, so when I said earlier about our core values, again, I hope if you all don't see my screen, let me know, yeah? Okay, in regards to Speed Home, our core values, we have four pillars, right? First of all, fun. We want to make work, play, and go all out in terms of both of it, right? And also mind blown. One of it is the next thing is do the right thing, and lastly, equality. Now, when we speak about equality, when we look at it, how we also personally practice it in Speed Home is that we don't look at race, we don't look at color, we don't look at ethnicity, we don't even look at gender nor age when we come to hiring, for that matter. So our team is very diverse. You look at it, we actually have all types of races, and even different people from different countries, right? We have from Bangladesh, India, we used to have Dutch, and also a couple more others, right? So that, all in all, when we look at it, we not only practice it on educating our landlords, but at the same time, internally, we always make sure that there is no such thing as discrimination. And when we handle whatever cases that may be, it's very unbiased. So that is what we hold dear to ourselves, right? So let me share a little bit in terms of what is racial discrimination in home renting. When we speak about discriminatory demands, one of them is like what Mr. Nazim shared earlier, those pictures, those are always circulating around the web, saying that they only preferred a certain race or a certain ethnicity, or even for rooms, a certain gender, or all those crazy list of criteria, and it just becomes like people feel more and more discriminated by the day, and those are actually, until today, it's happening. I saw one of the comments, they are asking, why is it that recently it's becoming worse? Is it because of social media? I definitely think so, because last time it's just more of like, if you see it, you experience it, you know it. Now you don't even need all this kind of thing. It's all on the social media, is circulating, it's being viral all along, and everybody's just sharing without any sort of education, for that matter. Then next one is certain targeted ethnicity. When I say that, there is a lot of landlords, that owners will actually say, I do not want people from this certain country, from that certain country, and it just goes on and about, and we actually do something about it, and I'll go deeper into that later. So I actually want to ask here the students is why do you think this is happening, right? You all can share with me later in the comments. Let me move on. Right. So let me share a little bit of what are the reasons behind they discriminate. Okay. This one is what we collected so far. We experience it. Time to time we do go by about it. So what is actually causing this racial discrimination in the renting category, right? So first of all is past experiences. That is the topmost reason being used. And when they say past experiences, they also say that, surrounding close encounter, meaning to say like they also have friends who say, this is my experience and you shouldn't rent out to this. You should avoid renting out to this certain place, or you should avoid renting out to this certain people from this certain country. And that becomes worse and worse because you experience is one thing. Other people have not experienced it, you go about and share about it. And then it becomes generalizing, like earlier was being said. You shouldn't generalize, right? One spoiled apple, you don't blame the whole tree. So that is going in and about in regards to this racial discrimination. Now we talk about inexperience in maintaining property. One of the reasons, I'll share that a little bit, is that sometimes they say that, okay, in my experience in the past, I rented to this certain race, this guy or this girl, and after that, when they move out from the house, I go back into my unit, I see that my furnishing is wrecked, is damaged. The house is so dirty. It's not even kept in a clean manner. It's so messy. And that is one of the maintenance in property. In sometimes also in Speak Home, they even share to us those photos, right? And we look at the photos. It's like, for example, when we talk about furnishing, we talk about furnitures. They probably have cats or dogs in the house, and the next thing you know, the whole sofa is like ripped off by their pet, and they don't actually fix it up before they leave. Then some of them, we also see some of the other photos where you go into the house, my goodness, they don't even look like a house. You know, they look like a dump site where there's so many rubbish just on the floor and they have been just living like that. So those are a few experiences shared by them. And also one of the other one is in regards to inexperience in paying rent. When I speak about inexperience in paying rent, a lot of landlord, when we start noticing and we see why is it a concern to somebody, right? Inexperience in paying rent is that tenant pays not on the due date. They probably pay a couple of days late, weeks late, months late, and this affects the cash flow of a property owner. And a lot of landlords nowadays, they are coming younger and younger generations who own their own property, and they put in so much like deposit to down payment to actually get a property. So when they get a property and they rent it out, a lot of them actually, to be honest with you, they actually do not have that fluid cash flow to pay the installment first upfront. They are counting on these tenants paying the rent for them to actually pay their their installment, sorry. So all of this is actually very, very troublesome to the landlord, and this is one of the reasons why they choose their tenants. Some of the other reasons are also noise complaints, partying late at night, friends keep coming in and out, there are fights happening in the house, so it disturbs the other tenants, the neighbors and all that kind of thing. That's another one. Now, lack of concern for utilities. This one happens a lot when they say that when you rent out a property, especially when it's a whole unit, not a room, you are expected as a tenant not only to pay the rental, but also to be responsible for your own utilities, meaning your Wi-Fi, your electricity, your water bill. You are supposed to be the one paying as a tenant. So most of the time, there are tenants that are actually moving in. They pay the rental on time, maybe, but in terms of the utilities, from the beginning until the end of their tenancy, 1 whole year or sometimes 2 years, they do not actually pay for their utilities. And the moment they move out, sometimes landlord, they don't check. They trust the tenant so much. The moment they check, they get shocked because the utilities are like 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, sometimes 5,000 and all that kind of thing. And in that category, last time, I think it's a bit more difficult to check in terms of utilities because they come as a physical bill. Now it's a lot easier. We actually have TNB app. We also have Shabazz. We also have Indah Water app and all that kind of thing. So landlord can actually check more often than compared to previously. Now we speak of lack of transparency. I think, I mean, like looking at it, a lot of the owners, a lot of the other people, when we speak of not only in terms of renting perspective, I think it's not in regards to intentionally being, or they are racist for that matter. There is just a lack of transparency. When you do not know the past of the tenant, then you tend to make assumptions of what you heard, what people experience, or what you could have experienced in the past. So if you know more about the tenant in their background, you are probably more accepting. There is more room for understanding that, okay, then this tenant is okay to actually rent my unit. I'll share a little bit later. So who is more likely to be discriminated? In our platform, when we have a look at it, there is a few categories when we look at it. We speak about, one of it is being university students. These are not ranked in highest or lowest, yeah. It's just that in general, there is university students that are likely to be discriminated. Why? Because then again, it comes back to the fact that they look at it and they say that I'm not too sure whether this student can pay yet or not. They are not earning any money. I'm not too sure if it's right to rent to a student, especially a whole unit that costs maybe 1,000 plus or 2,000. So these are one of the factors. Then we speak about foreigners. Foreigners, it's not just to one country. There is multiple different countries that we see that certain landlords that they just say, you know, this, I don't want this, I don't want that. So that is also one of the reasons. Now, when we speak about selective races, when we speak about selective races, I don't want to go into it too deep, but there is also, they look at like what some of the articles say that, you know, some Chinese don't even want Chinese, some Malay don't even want Malay, some Indian don't even want Indians. So that is what we call, like Prof. Nazim mentioned just now, culture deficit. You know, they don't even want to accept their own people, for example. Now, why is it that landlords get away with it until today? Right, it's a question that circulates. See, if landlords engage with a third party, right, an agent or a friend or whoever it may be, they actually have, these people who are helping out the owners actually have no say in the matter, because they are given a list of criteria. They're given a list by the owner to say this only or that only, or no this or no that, right? So then it becomes difficult for these agents, let's just call them agents, third party, right? To actually go about and reject or approve or accept a tenant of no preference, example. So that being said, how is it that they turn down these tenants if, let's say, they are of a certain race or a certain ethnicity? They turn down they have become a little bit smarter, and that is, it's still disgusting, to be honest, is that they actually go about and say that, sorry, the unit or the house has already been rented out just because it's of a certain race. And then how they come about and people realize this is because then they start searching, they continue looking for a place. Then after a couple of days later, a couple of weeks later, that unit is still there, that house is still there up for rent. So that is how they feel, you know, they feel straight away being discriminated, maybe because I'm of a certain race, I'm of a certain color, I'm not allowed to rent. That's why they turn me down, right? So until very recently, there were no laws in place for racial discrimination in the renting sector. But what I understand is that there is one coming up very soon. I think they are going to table it in 2022 in the first quarter. They will speak about this few pointers, which is racial discrimination. Great, finally they're going to talk something about it, because again, like I said, it hasn't been around. Rental rates, when rental rates is in regards to speaking about, making the place affordable also, because we also do see like, certain, like if it's a certain race that is wanting to rent, they jack up the price or something like that. One of also the other reasons to shoo away these people that they didn't want. Okay. And lastly is the tenancy agreement, some amendments to it to making it standardized or something like that, right? So we are also waiting. We actually also joined their talk the other time in terms of discussing this. So we are also waiting for it to come out, and hopefully this will be enforced properly in regards to racial discrimination. Now, okay, coming to what can we do or what we have been doing in Speed Home, I think in terms of racial, a lot of people don't want to go into it because it's sensitive. A lot of people don't want to talk about it also, it's because it's being too sensitive. So what we have been doing in Speed Home is that we play our part. And we hope that playing our part also will also open the eyes of all these owners that don't generalize, don't be racist first. Look at how, at the end of the day, what is the reason you want to rent out that place. So the reason for the landlords wanting to rent, why? They need the money, right? They need that cash flow or that circulation on, rather than letting the property sit there, no maintenance, nobody inside there, they are not earning out of it, is considered a loss. So the first main thing is to definitely get back that return of investment of buying that property. So that's the very first one. So that's hence the reason why we actually have this thing called the insurance protection. We are actually partnered with Allianz General Insurance, along with Screening, which is partnered with also Experian, the credit scoring company. Now put one and one together, put these two together, we actually see that we use this as one of the method to educate our owners and our landlords. And in the past, it wasn't, it took a lot of education, and right now we are 5 years in the market already. People know that Speed Home, how we do it and all that kind of thing. And hence now it's a lot easier comparatively than before in regards to educating these owners in this insurance protection and screening. Now, when we say why this tool would actually help in terms of the topic that we are here today, discrimination, is because, like I said, if it's the whole point is about getting the money, you want to make sure that your tenant is able to pay, correct? You want to make sure that your tenant is able to actually fork out the monthly rental. And that is being said that we do the credit worthiness check with Experian. We also have all our algorithm, machine learning from the past 5 years we have put together. And with this in place, we actually already reduced the risk of landlord by 30% of a defaulting tenant. Now, when I say a defaulting tenant, it could be run away, they disappear, they don't pay, they just disappear and stop paying altogether. Now that is one of it. Then how the insurance come into play is that even after reducing the risk of the 30%, there is still a risk, correct? In anything for that matter, there's a risk. So when in this category, if that being said, when the tenant is a working tenant, for example, and due to current pandemic situation, especially knowing that so many companies are cutting losses, freezing headcount, firing people, cutting their salary and all that kind of thing, there are tenants that find it difficult to pay and they are shy, or they don't even want to bring it up and they just disappear. They just pack their bags and they leave. So that's one of the risks that where insurance will actually come into play. The Allianz insurance will come into play and actually cover these losses of the landlord in various different categories. But the protection is up to 42,000 ringgit. So putting this risk and with this insurance protection together, we get to educate the landlord. Don't look at the color, don't look at their race or ethnicity. Get into this with maximum protection. Yeah, so that is one of the factor that a lot of people. So one of the long ago stats that we were looking at is only 30% only 30% of our tenants that the landlord wants. That means the landlord, only 30% were not discriminative. That means they say, I'm okay, I'm fine with everybody. I'm not discriminative at all, 30%. After that, with all this education, with this screening, insurance protection and all that kind of thing, it went from 30% and it flipped over the other side. 70% were actually more accepting towards this. Not being discriminative, not being generalizing or looking at their race or color, but accept the fact that they can pay, right? Their credit worthiness. Recently, when we look into it, it has become more and more accepting landlords. And that is one of also our success stories here, is that we are able to educate these people. The moment that we actually have all these landlords who say that, no, I don't want a certain race, we actually straight away, our customer support team will give a call to this landlord to educate in regards to this manner, right? So directly, indirectly, we sort of get the racial discrimination out of the picture. So, like I said, how does this help? Like I mentioned just now, it avoids nitpicking on the minority. Many of them start to look more towards the real thing, which is they can pay, I'm fine. Yeah, and we are also able to change the views, like I say, in terms of generalizing, because you speak about one experience, you speak about friends' experience. At the end of the day, you look at it, you understood that, there's no point generalizing, because you want to see about their credit worthiness more than anything else. And last but not least, then be able to achieve the end goal of renting a property. More and more people who used to have this landlords who discriminate, actually at the end of the day, we get more and more landlords being fine with it and don't speak about discrimination at all, right? And we also have, actually along in our app, our mobile app, our web, we actually also have a button that say report this landlord if actually they are being discriminative. We do have that. So the moment we get that notification that, okay, this tenant is saying that this landlord is being discriminative, we will investigate the matter. We will straight away also contact the owner to educate them again, right? And bear in mind this, if the landlord still continues to say, I don't want a certain race or ethnicity, we will actually ban the landlord. We will ban the landlord, of course, after the education, not in like, hey, no, you cannot be discriminative, and then ban that person. We say it nicely and we educate them. If in that matter that they still insist that they don't want, then we will actually switch off their listing on our platform. And if they change their mind and they finally accept that it's okay to accept all races, then only we turn it back on. So that is also one of our initiatives. All right, so that comes to the end of my slides here. I think I took quite fast. I just want to share with y'all also a little bit in regards to just two slides more. So we are also actually hiring. We are constantly always hiring and expanding. I think we are doing quite well, and we constantly want to get new hires, new talents. So we do have many positions available. Please check us out at careers@speedhome.com. We have Instagram, we have LinkedIn. And if you find that you are interested to join us as an intern, do you have friends or family that is looking for a job at a time like this? It's so difficult to find a job. Just send to us the resume at recruitment@speedhome.com, and we'll be glad to interview each and every one of you. Right? Just a quick next video, 15 seconds. I don't know if you can hear, but yeah. All right, that's all from me. Stop my sharing.
Thank you, Ms. Melanie, for your remarkable sharing on the overview of the house rental racism in Malaysia. And in my personal interesting fact that I learned today is that we do have a Speed Home app which you can click whether the landlord being racist to you. So
Yeah.
that's a fun fact. All right, we are now in the Q&A session. I have collected a few questions in the chat box. So the first question is from Kahli. Have you ever faced with situation where the tenant and landlord of different races come into a quarrel or dispute after renting a home in Speed Home because of the differences of culture? And what will Speed Home usually do if faced with such situation?
Okay. Technically speaking, and I honestly have never seen it. After a successful rental, and then they may have their differences and all in regards to race. We don't actually have something like that. That's why we put the education at the very beginning of the session itself, before even renting your home to somebody, or before the tenant even rent a home from a landlord. We have already been educating this. So we have never come to a point where, in terms of quarrel and dispute after renting. And if so, to say, how do we usually solve the problem? Never seen such things like that in my experience. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. The next question is, which race in particular is affected with this behavior in Malaysia? And why do you think so?
I think if you all have researched usually articles, right? It's very similar. And it is going about. So the particular race that is, if you're talking about Malaysians, then the ones that are harder to rent is actually the Indians. Yes, and it's very, like I said, disgusting. And why do I think so? I think that is more towards, like I shared in my slides earlier, it's due to that those few key pointers, is that they say that, in my past experiences, that these people are very noisy, they don't take care of my property well, they don't pay rent on time. So we do see that happening. But I just want to add that to this, right? And stats from Insider here, just share with you all a little bit. Please do not discriminate when it comes to renting, because at the end of the day, you want to speak about people defaulting, as in like running away tenants, do not pay, having problems and all. It's it does not come from a certain race only, it highly depends on the people, the individual. So that's why I say don't generalize. Yeah.
We have last question in the chat box. The question goes, if you think that this issue of racial discrimination in rental housing is still prevalent during this pandemic, considering how in the beginning of the pandemic, we are notified that many landlords were lamenting about their lack of tenants. Are they still discriminating despite their desperation to find new tenants?
Very, very good question. So now desperate already, then probably they drop the being discriminative, is it? I think, yes, there are a few, for sure, happens. But then again, we, like I said, along the way, we start to see that there are less and less landlords that actually speak about race or certain matter, but there is still. So to answer your question, yes, there are people who are more careful. I mean, not as careful as before, as in like they are just more generalized accepting. They said, okay, I just want to rent this place as soon as possible. Whoever they get, whatever prospects that they actually have interested in their unit, they say, just do as much checking as you can as possible. Just make sure that this tenant can be able to pay. I'm fine. Yeah. So we get that.
Right. Thank you so much, Ms. Melanie, for enlightening us with the questions.
You're welcome. Thank you, guys.
Right. So now we would like to invite all of the participants to join in a fun game in our Kahoot session. All right. So everyone gets ready. You may Google kahoot.com or click the link that's been shared in the participant WhatsApp group and click on the website. Then you may enter the code as shown on the screen. The code is 509 2882. Pick any nicknames you like, and we hope to see your nickname there. We have 44 participants joining, and many more, I guess. Come on, everyone, let us play in this fun game. There's so many nicknames. I think my personal favorite would be Flesh and Blood. Sounds like a song, somehow. And there's someone who actually take literally putting the nickname as nickname. Interesting. Alright, I give a couple more minutes. I bet there are still people who thinking of their nicknames. Like, what should I put? Okay. Alright, I guess that's all. Maybe we can start now. Alright, let's begin. Let's start. The first question. Okay, everyone, be prepared. So, what is the form of housing discrimination that is addressed in our legal forum today? I guess everyone could guess this correct. Wonderful. Yes, it's race, because as a reference to our ALSA UUM Legal Forum 2021, house rental racism, preference or discrimination. So yeah, you get that. Right, let's see. Ooh, J is in the lead. Alright, let us proceed to the next question. What is the most affected ethnicity in house rental racism issue in Malaysia? I think we've been discussed this throughout the presentations. Indian, yes. So studies show that the Indian society is the most affected ethnicity. 45% of almost 10,000 rental listings in Klang Valley explicitly rejected Malaysian Indian tenants. So it's an upward, yeah. Let's see the result. Ooh, Erica is taking the lead. Okay, next question. Which statute protects Malaysians from race-based discrimination? Oh, come on, law students. I bet you can answer this. Yes, Federal Constitution. In Article 8 of the Federal Constitution states that there shall be no discrimination against citizens on the ground of religion, race, descent, place of birth, or gender. Yeah. Let's see who's taking the place in the top. It's Erica, still standing strong. Right. ALSA UUM Legal Forum is an annual event. As COVID-19 pandemic has affected Malaysia since March 2020, this is the second time that this legal forum was conducted online. Is it? Is it the first, second, the third? False. So ASA UUM Legal Forum used to be an annual event of our unit. However, it was forced to cancel last year due to the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic. With respect to the practice of online learning, we are glad to resume our tradition this year and conduct our very first online legal forum through a virtual meeting platform to discuss house rental racism issue from its legal perspective. Okay, let's see. To take the lead. Ooh. Jay is taking the throne again. Alright. Let's go proceed with the next question. Residential Tenancy Act has passed by the Parliament to avoid house rental racism. What could it be? False. So, the RTA, currently being drafted by the Ministry of Housing and Local Government, APKT, is expected to be tabled in early 2021 and aims to protect both owners and tenants. However, due to the proclamation of emergency from 11 January 2021 to 1 August 2021, Parliament and state legislative assemblies will not sit at times set by the YDPA. Let's see. Ooh. Alright. Erica is taking back her throne. Next question. Education and greater interaction among the races are the key to ending house rental racism. Education. Is it true or it is false? It's true. As can be referred by Subang MP Wong Chen, said education would be the key to ending racism. As we could quote, he said that laws can help, but you will probably deliver better results through education and ensuring greater interaction among the races, he said. Right? Still the same? Remain the same? Okay, let's proceed with the next question. Come on, everyone. Who is the Minister of Housing and Local Government? You're good at general knowledge. Always watch the news. You will probably know her name. Yes, Datuk Zuraida binti Kamaruddin. Okay, let's see if we get this right. Still not moving. Alright. Next question. Residential Tenancy Act was tabled in 2017. If you guys do pay attention, you will know this answer. False. Yes, it is expected to be tabled in early 2021. Let's see the result. Oh no. KA or K is overturned. Okay. We'll see. Everyone, come on, everyone has opportunity to be in the first place. We'll see the last two questions. Second last question. Malaysia has one single central law specifically dealing with the relationship between landlords and tenants that addresses the house rental racism issue. Do we? Do we have a central law? False. We do not have. Malaysia does not have one single central law specifically dealing with the relationship between landlords and tenants, yet has different laws that could be applicable, such as for contract and measures to regain control of a property. Nothing certainty. If we have one legislation to deal with landlords and tenants, we can also look at how to address the issue of discrimination when it comes to renting out properties. Yeah, let us see the result. Whoa, Speedy Home is on fire now. Okay, taking the lead. Let us see the finale, the last question. Alright, everyone. So certain races are discriminated by agents and landlords due to preconceived notions. Is it true or is it false? It is true. Landlords and agents who discriminate against a certain race simply because of preconceived notions. Right, let us see the result. Dun, 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 dun. So the third place, Erica, congratulations. The second place is Ka. And the first place the winner goes to Speedy Ho. That is amazing. Alright, congratulations to the top 3 winners. Remember, everyone is a winner. It's just a matter of how fast your finger tap your smartphone screen. Alright, thank you everyone for participating in our Kahoot session. Next, we will continue to our third presentation session. Since we have attained a clearer picture pertaining to house rental racism, now we will go further to discuss what are the rights a landlord possesses. It is prevalent for us to notice that there are quite a lot of rental advertisements that specify the races of tenant. For instance, the sentence of Indian preferred or Malay family only in Malaysia. Although Article 8 of the Federal Constitution guarantees that every person is equal regardless of the race, yet the landlords argue that the premises were under their right of possession since it was their property. Therefore, they might have the right to choose the tenants according to their preference. It is difficult to solve the dispute between the landlord's right and right to equality since there is no specific provision addressed about this issue. Hence, the Ministry of Housing and Local Government, KPKT, is currently drafting the Residential Tenancy Act by referring to the Australian Residential Tenancy Act 1997, providing a win-win formula for both the landlord and tenant. As the new act might be implemented, we are pleased to have Ms. Morgana Sudari to enlighten us on the topic house rental racism, landlord's right versus right to equality. Welcome, Ms. Morgana. The floor is now yours.
Hello, can you guys hear me? Okay, let me just share my slides. Okay. Is it okay? Can everybody see? Yeah, okay, great. So, hi everyone, my name is Morgana Sundari Mahalingam. You can call me Morgana. I work at Azmi Fazli Maha and Sim. I'm a lawyer there, and predominantly, like you saw my profile earlier, I do construction disputes and a little bit of employment matters. So a tiny disclaimer, I'm not a constitutional lawyer, so I've tried really hard to condense this in a way for you to understand the overlap and the differences. If you have any questions, you can put in the chat box and I will address them later. And yeah, let's just get into it. Okay, is it? Okay, so the underlying theme that I'm hoping that all of us could take as we go through the session is understanding preference and prejudice. Because when I was first asked about this topic as well, the first thing I also did was actually go through my WhatsApp chat, looking at all the previous messages I've had to deal with property owners, because I rent a place in KL and all of them ask the same question, saying, oh, are you a professional? If you're a professional, what do you do? And then the next question is, what race are you? Are you Indian? And if you're Indian, are you Malaysian Indian or are you from India? So these are very common questions that was asked. And I think the underlying theme that it will be good for us to kind of have as we go through is preference and prejudice. What is preference and prejudice? So preference essentially is something that is liked or wanted more than another thing, or an advantage that is given to some people or things and not to others. Preference could also be something as simple as, some people prefer mint ice cream over chocolate ice cream. That's an abomination, but it's fine. Prejudice is an unfair feeling of dislike for a person or group because of race, sex, religion, etc., or a feeling of like or dislike for someone or something, especially when it's not reasonable or logical. You actually might face this on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes you are in the presence of people who say things like, I'm not really comfortable going into that shop. Why? Oh, because there's someone there of a particular race and I'm not really comfortable about it. And when you probe a bit more, you ask them, hey, why do you feel that way? And then they just tell you, I don't know, I just don't feel comfortable. So what you need to understand is when it comes to preference, sometimes there's a lot of underlying or unaddressed prejudice that results in the preference. So that's sometimes why you have property owners who say things like, oh, I only want a Chinese tenant, or I only want an Indian tenant. Oh, wait, that never happened. Or I only want a Chinese tenant, because there are some preferences, or what they seem to understand as preference as a cultural understanding, a language understanding, could stem from unaddressed prejudices. Okay? So this is the underlying theme that I kind of want to go with the whole session. So the flow will essentially be, are there currently any laws governing the legal relationship? Do the respective parties have rights, and what are they? Can property owners choose and or reject potential tenants as they please? And if yes, how does this affect or infringe the rights of tenants? So I use the word property owners as opposed to landlord or landlady to kind of be more inclusive without having a gender issue. Hope that's okay. Is it moving? My slides are moving. Okay. Are there any current laws governing the legal relationships between property owners and tenants? Okay, so right now, essentially, it's all based on your tenancy agreement, which is covered by the Contracts Act. You don't have a specific law that's probably called like the Tenancy Agreement Act. There's nothing like that. It's just contract. Okay, so the entire relationship that we're going to be looking at, look at it objectively. It's purely a contractual relationship. There are a handful of situations, for example, like eviction issues that you can be covered under the National Land Code, the Specific Relief Act, and the Distress Act. But these address very specific things. What we're normally trying to look at is like, is there something very broad that covers tenancy? And well, no, it's only the Contracts Act. Yeah, so tenancy in Malaysia is purely contractual. And if there's any grievances, for example, you want to evict someone, someone hasn't paid, someone has destroyed your premises, you would bring them to court, which comes with a lot of other problems. So I got this off the property website. This is essentially what property owners and tenants have to do in terms of responsibility or obligations. So it's things like paying annual taxes, the premiums, the basic necessities, and tenants, of course, you timely pay your rental fee. When you're supposed to leave, you leave the premises and you take care of the place. So these are very objective ways to look at how you navigate or govern a tenancy agreement. A property owner has to do A, B, and C, and a tenant has to comply with A, B, and C. There really, if you look at it, there really isn't an issue of race here. But before you get into the tenancy agreement, that's where the race or the racial discrimination comes in. So, if property owners choose reject potential tenants as they please or on grounds of religion, race, or ethnicity, legally there's nothing stopping them. Legally, or there's no act that says you cannot, you don't have that right, or you're precluded from choosing people based on their religion and race. They can do what they like simply because it's a commercial transaction between two private people, the owner and the tenant. So it's just a commercial transaction, and if anything, they're probably just being really honest and transparent with you by saying like, look, I don't want you because of your race, your skin color, or your background. It's just that. It's really a contractual relationship that unfortunately does not come from a very nice place. Okay. How does this affect infringe the rights of tenants under the Federal Constitution, specifically Article 8, which is what we're looking at, which was addressed in the earlier two sections, so thank you so much for that. A property owner's election of accepting, rejecting certain types of tenants can also breed into a variety of other problems, which may not necessarily be legal. These could be very social barriers that you overcome. So they can come under the umbrella of housing discrimination, which takes into account things like exclusionary and non-exclusionary discrimination. Exclusionary discrimination, I think, is a bit more common in Malaysia, where it's a tenancy ad that says room for rent, Chinese only. So those are very upfront ways of saying no to a certain type of person. Non-exclusionary discrimination could be very little subtle things like, for example, someone gives me a place to rent and they say like, look, Mugana, we are okay with you renting the place, but we don't like the smell of curry, so therefore you're not allowed to use the kitchen for major cooking purposes. Those are very subtle ways of saying that, look, I don't particularly want you here, but you're already here, but I'm not a big fan of, your background, your race, or ethnicity, because cooking curry is predominantly what I would be cooking. Then you're also looking at normalizing racism on the basis of commercial transparency. So like I was saying just now, because it's a contractual relationship, commercial transaction, two private individuals, you're just saying like, I'm just being honest. And then you're looking at expanding barriers like spatial inequality. So spatial inequality basically means an unequal distribution of resources and services. So to kind of give you a little understanding of what this means is, you're looking at a very densely populated place like KL, where all your services, accessibility to housing, to healthcare is all in one space. So when when property owners decide to say no to a specific population or demographic, you push them further away into the outskirts where they don't have access to these things. Then, of course, you're looking at a very indirect result of contribution towards racial and social segregation. I think this will make a lot more sense if you look at it from a very geographical standpoint on how races are populated across the country. But so these are very non-legalistic issues or problems that you might eventually face. So let's look at the federal constitution, right? Okay, so we're looking at Article 1 and Article 2. Article 8 sub 1, Article 8 sub 2. So one says all persons are equal before the law and entitled to the equal protection of the law. And sub 2 says, except as expressly authorized by this constitution, there shall be no discrimination against citizens on the ground only of religion, race, descent, place of birth, gender in any law or in any appointment to any office or employment under public authority. Okay, so there are a lot of cases that talk about Article 8, but a lot of the older ones have gone quite in depth about it. So you're looking at, for example, like this criminal case, Kong Teng Kin, where it says the principle of Article 8 is that a law must operate alike on all persons under like circumstances. And it's very interesting when you actually dissect how Article 8 looks, okay, because there shall be no discrimination, okay, that's great, against citizens on ground of only religion, race, descent, place of birth, etc., etc. But it tells you all this in the context of any law, which means that there has to be a certain provision under an act of parliament that is discriminating you on these grounds, okay, unless whatever is exempted under Article 8 and 5. If you also look at this other case of Su Liang Yu, which says, no person shall be denied equality before the law, equal protection of the law, but Article 8 does not prevent Parliament from making a law based on or involving some classification. So discriminatory law is good if it's based on reasonable, permissible classification, which was discussed earlier in the first session. And interestingly, a construction dispute had to actually talk about this as well, and that's this recent case of Mega Sasa against Kinsa Bakti. So they did talk about classification and how positive reasons or positive classification is still allowed under the Constitution, which means there's no absolute or outright way to ensuring equality in how we normally understand it. So if there are positive or affirmative decisions made where it's okay, that has a very valid or like this one, permissible reason to classify people, then it's fine. So the law in question may classify persons, and Article 8 guarantees is that a person in one class should be treated the same as another in a different class. Okay, so is there an infringement under Article 8 sub 1 and sub 2? Technically, no, because like I was telling you before, this is a purely contractual relationship. It's essentially a property owner making a tenant saying like, look, I saw your ad, I'm making an offer, I'd like to take up your place, and the property owner saying, yes, no. It's just that. So there's no law in question for you to bring it up against the federal constitution for you to say it's discriminatory. So Article 8.2 has also been often decided to apply vertically, meaning it's bitchful. So to really say that the constitution helps you protect a tenant's right to equality under this premise, not really. So, which is why we come back to the Residential Tenancy Act, which is supposed to be tabled this year, but like our moderator has explained, because of the pandemic and then the proclamation of emergency, we have pushed this for potentially next year. So the RTA is supposed to protect tenants from being forced to vacate premises without proper notice, act as a framework for rental property market, act as a mediator with tribunals. There are a bunch of articles about this. If you just Google the RTA, you will see a lot of people talk about this. Predominantly the National House Buyers Association, so which is very interesting because they're going to give you this very commercial perspective for this entire thing. When you talk about racial discrimination, it sometimes feels very personal because a lot of us go through it daily. Sometimes we see it happen to our friends and family. But you have to understand a tenancy is still a commercial transaction. So how you approach it in terms of these rights has to be to an extent of balance, which is why I say the underlying theme still goes back to being preference and prejudice. Are you really preferring one tenant over the other, or is your prejudice guiding you to choose one over the other? So the HBA, their concerns were it should protect legitimate interests of property owners and tenants, the rights of residents in gated communities against establishments like Airbnb. They also point out that rental is based on a free market. It's a commercial arrangement between two private people, and the government should not interfere by virtue of the RTA. So the RTA shouldn't take away indefeasible rights of property owners, which include the right to dispose, lease, rent property to anyone of their choosing. So when you look at it very objectively, there really shouldn't be an issue of race. But because of the property owners' right to choose who they want, that's where the race issue comes in. So will the RTA work? Okay, there's a lot of potential for it, of course. I think it is good that we're trying to address these things, but how far of the enforcement of the RTA will really depend. If there's good enforcement, there are good mechanisms built in, for example, to address complaints. So like what we did in the second session, where seat owners has this complaint mechanism where tenants who feel like a property owner is being discriminatory towards them, you can make a complaint and they address it. So if you have mechanisms like that to address grievances, then sure, the RTA would be really useful. But at the end of the day, there is still no guarantee because prejudice, preference, there's a very fine line, and sometimes your preference can stem from unaddressed prejudices. A good study, if you want to really go into it, you can look at the Fair Housing Act in the US. So this was passed back in the day, 1968, and it was to basically eliminate discrimination against home renters buyers based on things like race, color, religion. Later, I think in 1988, it also included gender discrimination and families or people with disabilities or children with disabilities. Is it really effective? Again, it's not 100% effective, but the point of the matter is that you have your state legislation or your national legislation kind of addressing these issues, which makes it a little bit more, I guess a little bit more useful to create awareness, because you're trying to tell people around you, like, look, even the Act talks about it, so we should also be a little bit more aware. So the factors to consider, like I said, it's a lot about the enforcement. Like you can have a dozen acts that addresses racial discrimination, but the enforcement and also how you actually execute the mechanism that deals with discrimination, how you address the complaints, all these things really matter. And would it cause more harm by limiting controlling criteria afforded to property owners and how they choose their potential tenants? So this one was very interesting because this was something raised when the Fair Housing Act went through a couple of revisions, because there were some issues about purely deciding tenants on social income. And some of the arguments raised in Congress was the fact that, oh, if you do that, then you're going to push the poor into slums and to the outskirts. So are you going to cause a lot more social inequality within the demographic? And you're also looking at digital age and its advancements. So Speed Home is an amazing example, an amazing mechanism that has been addressing this. But there are also the setbacks of different situations. For example, I think you can see this on WhatsApp and Facebook. Like there could be an amazing ad for a rental, and then you drop in a text, and then they just ignore you. You don't know why they're ignoring you, but there's a potential that they're ignoring you because you're a certain race, a certain color, a certain sexual orientation, and they just don't like it. So there's also that. And one way, I don't know, maybe it's a lawyer in me speaking, but I think one way forward is, of course, the ratification of ICERT, International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. Why I think ICERT would be a good starting point is because it would impose a more national standard or pressure on all of us to ensure when acts are passed, they take into account these kind of issues. So whatever acts we have across the board, they do talk about racial discrimination and ensure that these are addressed to a certain extent. So these are the references for you later, and that's all, folks. I hope that was okay. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop me an email. Let me see how to get out of this.
Thank you, Ms. Morgana, for your insightful knowledge and explanations. So yes, we are now in a Q&A session. So for the participants who may have a question to raise, you may unmute yourself to ask your inquiry to our speaker. All right, we have one question, yes, in the chat box. Mind if I read it for you, Ms. Morgana?
Yes, please.
Okay. So the question's from Sabrina. She asks, some of the racial discrimination in housing is due to the bad experience of the landlord. Do you think the tenant also has the responsibility on reducing the racial discrimination in housing for this matter?
Okay, so you see, that's interesting, right? Because like a lot of times, I want to tell you this from my personal experience, especially. A lot of times, when property owners come up to me and they have an issue with my race, it's mostly because of how other people of my race behave. Yes, I have an individual responsibility to ensure that I do not live up to really old, unsupported stereotypes, but I also can only do so much. Like right now, I rent a place, and the other day my property owner said that I've been a really good tenant. But this is the same person who told me 3 years ago that, I don't know, you're Indian, should I not? So there's only so much I can do. So it's really unfair if my property owner at that time was like, just because all Indians are like this, so I don't think I want to give you a place. I can't even have the opportunity to show her that, no, I am not like that. So do I think a tenant has responsibility? I think everybody has a responsibility to be on your best behavior if you're renting from a place, because like it was pointed out in the first session as well, a lot of these stereotypes are just how the West has seen us. It's not really us. We are a lot more than all these stereotypes and prejudices. So if given the opportunity, yeah, we should definitely do a lot more than just living up to those things, if anything. I hope that answered it.
Thank you, Ms. Morgana. So we have another question in the chat box from Lin Juni. Okay, so the question is, based on your opinion, do you think the residential tenancy agreement which restricted the landlord's right to choose the preferred tenants is fair for the landlord, since they are the one who need to bear the cost of renovation and repair?
Okay, so thank you for that. That's a very objective question, and I think that's really important. So I don't know how the RTA is going to be worded and drafted. So let's say they do specifically impose that the landlord's right to choose preferred tenants is restricted. Is it fair? Well, morally, equitably, yeah, because you don't want property agents picking and choosing based on racial tendencies or the color of your skin, your sexual orientation, your gender, all these things, right? But commercially, you're infringing on their right of how they want to exercise the use of their premises. So it's a very difficult balancing act. So the only way you want to circumvent this is actually a lot of awareness and a lot of education. And from the base level, you're looking at how you speak about these topics at home, how it's addressed in your education system, how you guys as law students deal with these kind of issues. Because like I said, like even with my property owner, it was a lot of being given the opportunity of 3 years to showing her that Indian people are not all the same. We're all different. I mean, anyone who's Malaysian can be completely different, irrespective of my background. So it's a balancing act, right? Because you're infringing on their right to choose how and what they want to do with their property. And you're also looking at maintaining a kind of equality that doesn't impede on other people's background. So, do I think that it's fair? I think in utopia, maybe it's fair because I would like to rent places as easily as the rest of my friends. In terms of whether they need to bear the cost of renovation, yeah, I know they do. So that's where I think it goes back to Ms. Sabrina's question about being responsible as a tenant. So you have to take cognizance of where you're staying, what you're doing with the utilities, what you're doing with the furniture. So I think again, awareness, understanding, not just for property owners, but for tenants as well.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Morgana. It seems that we have a few more time. So if there are any participant who would like to raise any questions, You may unmute yourself to ask your inquiry to any of our speakers. You can also type up in the chat box. Is there any questions from the floor to any of our speakers today? Seems that everything been covered. There's no more questions from the floor. This is a great news. So, all right. Before the end of our legal forum today, I would like to invite our guest speakers to deliver some word of encouragement to our participant today. So, Mr. Nazim, would you like to begin?
Okay, me, words of encouragement. Well, look, what the law is, how the law is understood, these are two different things. How do you understand, what do you understand by the law? The significance that you put on the law, these are socialized, these are social things. There are things around you which influence you to see whether anything is significant, whether it's important, and what it means. So my point is this: don't get so angry, don't get so frustrated when you see people who do not understand what the law is. Their understanding might not be the same with yours, and they might not even put any significance to that part of the law which you which you feel that should be high up in your agenda. Don't get so easily discouraged. And you know, law does not exist in vacuum. And for example, here in right to property regarding rental property in Malaysia, it does not exist in a vacuum. Other things conspire to so that what you see right now does not happen on its own. There's so many other factors involved. And another factor which we did not have the time to do it today is, why is rights to property so important? That is another matter. All right, well, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nazir. Now let us invite Miss Melanie, a word for encouragement.
Okay, I think I've also mentioned just now, and I think some of the questions here are also very good in that manner in regards to is it fair, and also does tenant hold the responsibility. I think all in all, in terms of since we're talking about renting experience here, it shouldn't be at all based on racial discrimination. Now, that being said, is that everybody plays a part, whether how small, how big, how it doesn't matter in terms of size what you think it is, because they all start somewhere. And the fact that all the questions being asked earlier can each of us can resonate moving forward is that the fact in regards to you speak about discrimination is, then again you must understand what is the whole point of you renting out the house, right? And the generalizing part is something that all of us should educate each other, whether not only from the government, when you see a friend or you see somebody acting that way, just tell them out, you know. And yes, I'm so glad that Speed Home, we have this functionalities that we can, you know, directly, indirectly, you know, stop this from happening. And we hope that, you know, when we do our part and the landlords don't look at the race anymore, then they can start like what Miss Morgana mentioned, that at first her landlord was scared. Then after seeing her throughout it all, how they are actually, you know, proper payment, taking care of the unit well, and taking care that unit like it's their own, right? That's what we hope to do, and it's a long-term education, but it's an education regardless. And I hope that it somehow from here today, that's something that you learn also, to also share the word around. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Melanie. Miss Morgana, would you like to give some last words?
I think this is something probably all of you would have heard. I think just keep asking why, because even when you talk about prejudice and preference on your daily life, your conversations with your friends, your family, always ask why, because it's really within your circle. And it's one of those ripple effects. If you start and then the next person gets on with it, and then the third and the fourth, you know. So if someone tells you they don't like something because they prefer it over the other, ask them why. Ask them to address the reason why, because sometimes it's purely familiarity. I've been very familiar with this particular race, therefore I'm more comfortable with them. Sometimes it's a language thing, sometimes it's a cultural thing. You see it when you go abroad sometimes. The moment you see another Malaysian, you're like, yes, they're here. But the hell, you're there to see the other country, aren't you? But that's because it's familiar, it's comfortable to you. It's not because you're well, I guess racist or nationalistic in any way, but it's because it's comfortable and familiar. So always ask why. Understand where this issue of racism is coming from. Where is the core of it? It all. So education, awareness starts on the base level. How you explain to your kids, your niece, your nephews, your cousins, all of them. Just always keep asking them why. Let them sit too on it. Like, think about it. Why am I thinking this way? Why am I not? And this racial discrimination comes across everything. It's not just housing. It's when you pick your partner, when you make friends, when you work at companies. You have to make a lot of conscious decisions. Like one of the decisions I made for myself was when I work at a law firm, I only want to work at a multiracial firm. I didn't want to work at a firm that is of a singular race, because I wanted to be able to explore different diversity, have different friends, have a different understanding of things. Because sometimes your cultural background also will affect how you understand laws and its enactments, you know. So ultimately, just ask why.
Thank you, Ms. Morgana. All right, so to commemorate today's event, we would like to kindly request everyone to turn on your cameras for the photo session. I will pass the floor to our virtual photographer, the committee member.
Participants, please turn on your camera for the photo session. Thank you. All right, we'll be taking another one. Please be ready. All right, thank you. And I will now pass back to Fatin.
Thank you, everyone, for your kind cooperation. Before we end today's meeting, the ALSA UUM Legal Forum 2021 would like to express our deepest appreciation to our guest speakers, Mr. Nazim, Ms. Melanie, and Ms. Morgana, for their time to share their expertise with us today. We are also grateful to all of you for showing up this afternoon. We are sincerely obliged for your enthusiasm, support, and attention throughout this event. Now, we have officially come to the end of today's event. If you are interested in our future events, please follow us on our social media to be notified with our latest initiatives. For all the participants, kindly scan the QR code as shown on the screen, and you may fill in the Google form provided for merit purposes. You may now leave the meeting room. Take care and stay safe.